since we do have some people that are not familiar with UEDA, I did want to quickly cover who we are, as I do every time, and I will be brief. But the University Economic Development Association works to connect our members, which are higher education institutions, private sector businesses, and economic development organizations, to resources that help facilitate economic growth within our communities. And our members represent those who are on the cutting edge of modern economic development. Never before really has academia and the private sector and those economic development stakeholders that I spoke about been so reliant on one another to create economic opportunity. And that's something that I've said as part of these webinars for many years, but it really truly has meaning in the day and age that we're living in right now. Our members work together to expand economic opportunity within their communities and really work in the areas of talent, innovation, and place. And where we really excel, I feel, as an organization is in best practices and showcasing those best practices that are happening across the country and across the world. So we've launched this town hall series to spotlight some of those best practices that are happening across the country as we work towards economic recovery, and also open up to you all to serve as a forum for engagement. So with that, we will have our spotlight presentation today, and I'll introduce our featured speaker. We'll have some Q&A for them, and then we'll get into the questions that you might have for each other. If you have a question, again, that you would like to pose to the entire group, we'll make your audio available, unmute you, and to have that happen, just raise your hand. That could be something that you're experiencing in your own community that you want to get the opinions of colleagues about. It can be something relative to your profession or to your university. We want to make sure that we open it up to everyone and have open dialogue during this time. So we'll start there if you have questions for each other, and then we're going to get into some of the standard questions that we've had each time if we have time. And that's ideas that you might have that you've experienced to protect human capital and jobs, ideas to support businesses, ideas to foster humanity, all relative to the COVID crisis. So again, refresher, if you do want to speak, raise your hand. If you have a question, use the Q&A. And if you have technical opportunities or issues, or you just want to chat, use the chat. Those are our platforms today. So with that, I want to get into to our today's spotlight presentation. The Institute for Policy and Social Research at the University of Kansas has been providing data and visualizations to assist policymakers and the public as well with the understanding of the impacts of the COVID-19 virus on that Kansas economy. And as part of their mission, they've created a series of weekly briefings that review this data and discuss policies and their impact. And they continue to have great attendance at these public forums. And I'm going to allow Donna to speak a little bit about that. Donna Ginther is the Dean's Professor of Economics and the Director of the Institute for Policy and Social Research at the University of Kansas. And she's a Research Associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research. Her major fields of study are scientific labor markets, gender differences in employment outcomes, wage inequality, scientific entrepreneurship, and children's educational attainments. Dr. Ginther is published in several journals, including Science, Journal of the American Statistical Association, Journal for Economic Perspectives, Demography, Physiological Science in the Public Interest, and the Papers and Proceedings of the American Economic Association. She's also received research funding from the National Science Foundation, the NIH, and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, in addition to the Kauffman Foundation. And her research has been featured in several media outlets, including The Economist, New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, NPR, and the Boston Globe. And I'm sure with her current work, it's even been further than that. She's testified before the Subcommittee on Research and Science Education of the U.S. House of Representatives on the Fulfilling the Potential of Women in Academic Science and Engineering Act of 2008. Dr. Ginther has advised the National Academies of Science, National Institutes of Health, and the Sloan Foundation on the diversity and future of the scientific workforce. So with that, Dr. Ginther, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for being with us today. And I understand you're going to take over the slides from here and lead us through.
Thank you for your kind introduction, Tim. It's a pleasure to speak with people at UEDA. Through Jenna Hurd's leadership, we've had a strong connection to UEDA over the years. Once you stop sharing, I can start. Okay, great. Can you see my slides?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. This is a version of the briefing that I do every week, updating the public and policymakers about the data. And so our goal has been to synthesize the data on the coronavirus in Kansas, talk about economic indicators, and just basically provide public service. Through doing this, we've had the opportunity to brief the governor and the Kansas Department of Commerce, and we post these briefings at our COVID-19 website. This is an overview, and we're going to talk about GDP, unemployment, and what's going to happen next. This is the data. As of yesterday, Kansas had 5,700 cases, 144 deaths. The US had 1.2 million cases and 67,000 deaths. The first briefing was on March 23rd, where our counts were below 100. The growth rate has slowed in both Kansas and the US, but we have outbreaks in meatpacking plants and prisons in Kansas. This is from the Financial Times, and it tracks a number of cases in the US relative to other countries by day of onset. And you see we've flattened the curve in the US, but we haven't bent the curve like China or other countries have. We've been focusing on our 5 largest counties in Kansas and the meatpacking counties. You see that where the University of Kansas is located, Douglas County. We've had really flat growth rates, as has Shawnee County, where our state capital is, but our most populous counties continue to see growth. What's really worrisome is the outbreaking in the meatpacking plants. We have 4 counties with meatpacking plants, and in 3 of the 4, we see exponential growth. Ford County cases are twice as high as they were last week, as Finney counties are 3.3 times higher. This is a really out of control outbreak within the state. We have similar outbreaks within our prison system. We also use a lot of data and GIS, and this is a map of cases per 1,000 people in Kansas, and you can see the meatpacking outbreak out in southwestern Kansas, where Seward County has 25 cases per 1,000. This is one of the highest rates in the country. So it's interesting to look and see at our more populous counties here in Northeast Kansas, not as extreme in terms of cases per population. We track testing per 1,000, and Kansas has only performed about 12.6 tests per 1,000 people, where the average in the United States is 23.9 or 23. And we have a higher rates of positive tests than the rest of the country, probably because of the meatpacking outbreak. The Federal Reserve banks are a great source of data. So I've been looking at the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank and the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank. And this is analysis by the St. Louis Fed that shows that outbreaks by income quintile, where they look at counties and they see the amount of financial distress in 2018, and then they correlate that with the outbreaks, and the higher quintiles have more financial distress. And you see it's those distressed counties that actually have the highest growth rates in cases, and unfortunately also in deaths. So this virus is having an impact, a disproportionate impact on the least among us, on those people who are least economically equipped to deal with it. We work with the Kansas Department of Labor weekly to look at their unemployment claims data. I update people on the stock market. It's been pretty flat in April, but still down 19% since the peak in February. We got new GDP numbers last week. If you think that we just slammed on the brakes in mid-March in the country, and we had a decrease in consumption, this is the blue bar over here, by 5.6%, and investment. This says we slammed on the brakes really, really hard. If those 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of stopping economic activity were enough to cause GDP to drop by about 5%. It's going to be bad in the next quarter. There is at the St. Louis Fed, and this happens occasionally. Can you hear me still? I've frozen
Yes.
up. All right.
Yeah,
so
your video froze, but I can still hear you.
Could you, the only way I can get out of this is if I stop and restart my machine. So maybe what we can do is I can do that, reboot, and come back in here in a second, in a minute.
Sure. Do you
Okay.
want me to get your slides pulled up on my side?
Yeah, why don't you try to run them on your side and see if we can go from there.
You got it.
All right, I'm gonna reboot.
So Jenna, I know that you're familiar with this work. I mean, is there anything else that you can
Well,
offer?
I wanted to say, once we launched this website, within the first couple of weeks, we had like over 12,000 hits on the website. So people are really looking at this data and information. And Donna has also spoken, to the Governor's Advisory Committee as well as the Department of Commerce about this data, and as well as she's on a panel, and all this. These different presentations are available from the website. That was.
Is the state is Kansas looking to the University of Kansas, or I'm sorry, Kansas State University, to provide?
No, we're University of Kansas. Okay.
I know. I'm looking at Rebecca's name as being on here, and I'm going back and forth. So University of Kansas, is the state looking to the University of Kansas as a to provide the data as the data experts, or how is that being viewed within the state as far as who does what within the ecosystem?
So for this Governor's Advisory Committee, Donna's on that, as well as Wichita State, and then a person that does health policy from the Med Center. And so the Med Center is also advising on, there's Donna back on. So the Med Center is also advising about health policy and that type of data.
Okay.
Back.
Welcome back.
Can I let you run the slides, Tim?
You got it.
All right. Could you do the next slide then? So this is data from FRED, which is at the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, and it's a weekly economic activity index. And it's dropped by about 12%, which suggests that GDP is going to be about 12% lower for the second quarter. Could you go to the next slide? Oops, this is the wrong graph. But unemployment claims came in today. There are 33.5 million unemployed in over a month in the past 6 weeks. And the unemployment rate is over about 20%. You go next. We also look at claims in Kansas and Missouri, since we're right on the border, since a lot of economic activity happens on the border between Kansas and Missouri. The unemployment rate in Kansas is about 16%. We've had over 200,000 in initial claims since March 14th. And what's troublesome is that the people who have filed for unemployment claims are not those who are self-employed or non-employer establishments, who should be able to get funding, unemployment funding for the federal government, but they haven't shown up yet. Next. We are able to look at unemployment within industry, and I've ranked the industries by employment size here, and you see that government, healthcare, manufacturing, and retail trade are our top 4 industries by employment. That's 53% of total employment in the state. And in some industries, we have like 33% unemployment in manufacturing. Next. We're able to count how many jobs we've lost in each industry. Manufacturing, which is a huge contributor to our gross state product, has lost 55,000 jobs since March. These 5 industries account for 71% of people who have lost their jobs in the state. Next. We have a state data center, and we, create these maps to look at the economic impact. You see Sedgwick County, where our aerospace manufacturing is located, has lost 67,000 jobs. Johnson County, which is the largest county in the state next to Kansas City, has lost nearly 40,000 jobs. So those are the total job losses. If you look at the next slide, we calculated the unemployment rates. And Sedgwick County, again, our manufacturing hub, has a 26% unemployment rate, and surrounding counties have about a 25% unemployment rate. Western Kansas, which is mostly rural and agrarian, has very low unemployment rates, but these people are working in industries where they can still work. We even have, in Douglas County, we have about a 16% unemployment rate. Next slide. If we look, if you think about economic growth, about 2/3 of it is consumption, 17% is investment, 18% is government. Retail sales, consumption has fallen and consumption has changed. We know that government expenditures are increasing. The World Trade Organization projects that trade is going to fall between 13 to 32%. Next slide. So we divided each industry into its contribution to gross state product. That's on the bottom axis. And on the y-axis, we have each industry as a function of unemployment. And the blue dots, the size of the dots is how much its employment share. So government makes up a huge part, about 12% of employment of gross state product, and has a very low unemployment rate. In the upper right-hand quadrant, you see the industries that are being hurt the most and that contribute the most to gross state product, including manufacturing, real estate, retail, and health services. Everything that's blue is doing relatively well considering, and everything that's yellow has relatively high unemployment rates, but is not a huge contributor to gross state product. So you can see how different sectors in this figure, you can see how different sectors are being really impacted. So real estate has really small employment, but you think of, real estate is selling houses, commercial real estate, and rent, right? That contributes a lot to the state gross state product, and that's being hurt quite a bit. Next slide. These are surveys from the Kansas City Fed, and they show the index of manufacturing has dropped about 30%, in line with about the 33% unemployment drop. And the services index has dropped by nearly 60%. Next. They asked special questions about COVID-19, and about 70% of manufacturing firms and 70% of service firms took advantage of the SBA Paycheck Protection Program. And the other activity that these firms are doing is drawing down their cash reserves. Next. We were able, if you go to the next slide, we were able to get data on the Paycheck Protection Program throughout the country. There was $350 billion in the first tranche and another $310 billion in the second tranche. Next. And these dark red states are the ones that benefited the most in terms of the number of loans. In Kansas, we got $5.1 billion and made about 45,000 loans. We ranked 10th in terms of loans per capita. But the need is really great. We have about 56,000 small businesses and another 200,000 non-employer establishments. So only 17% of potential firms were funded. But that's relatively better than the US, where only 12% of these establishments were totally funded. Next. We are able to calculate the share of total payroll that was potentially covered. And in Kansas, 72% of payroll was covered by this PPP program, whereas in the US, 60% of expected payments were covered. If anybody on the call would like access to the data, we'd be happy to share it. It's SBA data, and we can give you the data underlying the maps. Next slide. One of the reasons why Kansas did better, we had a lower average loan rate than the US, but we have relatively more banks per population and more banks engaged in small business lending. And this was noted in an article in the Washington Post, how family-owned businesses really, how smaller banks were really leading the way and providing this type of funding. Next slide. The KC Chamber of Commerce also surveyed business. 35% of small businesses in the KC Metro had received funding, and 25% were waiting on their applications. If you look at the next slide, you can see that on the left-hand side, about 40% of firms had adjusted their business model, and about 39% had seen revenues decrease by more than 50%. On the right-hand side, the immediate concerns were this lost revenue and their employees' financial welfare. Next slide. So the big question is, what happens next now that states have started to reopen? Georgia started on April 24th. Texas threw the doors open this past week. And Kansas started phase 1 on Monday. If you go to the next slide. When we lift the stay-at-home order, we have a trade-off. We're going to have probably more disease and more economic activity. So we're going to trade off safety for economic activity. If you go to the next slide. As states reopen, it's forecasted that there's going to be more virus and more deaths. So they've increased, the forecast models have increased the deaths. Those models at the in the middle of April had forecast 60,000 deaths, and we've blown past that. We're now over 70,000. Next slide. The increases in mobility indicate that there will be more contacts and more opportunities to get the virus. Next slide. And it's hitting rural America in the food processing facilities and prisons, especially in Kansas and in other states. Next slide. The question is, are the consumers going to return to the businesses? And the Washington Post reported a survey that said 67% of people will be reluctant to shop for clothes. 78% will be reluctant to eat at restaurants. When are we going to have safety with opening manufacturing facilities? These projections don't bode well for the future. If we're going to have increased deaths, we may have a starting and stopping, like you could think of it as pumping on the brakes really hard, and as the virus heats up again. So it's very concerning that we're opening up in a time when it appears that we don't have the virus under control. Next slide. And so we will be continuing to monitor the situation on behalf of the state of Kansas at our website and the policy response. We're in the process right now of using state unemployment claims data to estimate the lost wages from unemployment, net of unemployment benefits, to look at sort of the long-term economic impact of these employment losses on the state. It's our sincere hope that you stay healthy, and I'm happy to answer any questions. If you go to the next slide.
Thanks, Donna. Appreciate that. Yeah, if you do have questions, please use Q&A function, or you can use the webinar chat. Donna, do you mind if we share your slides after the presentation?
I'm pleased to share these with anybody.
Great, thanks. So, you know, it looks like definitely that the University of Kansas has taken sort of a leadership role in providing statewide data, and you know, that's to be commended. With your wealth of experience in dealing with data and analysis, what has been most surprising to you during this time and looking at this data in particular?
How bad the data quality is. The economic data quality isn't, right? The economic data quality is robust. If we look at the data quality on the virus in terms of number of cases, number of deaths, we don't know. And trying to make a decision based on bad data about whether or not to open up the economy is really troubling. I've been working with people at health insurance companies, with county health departments to look at survey data. You know, there are some COVID survey data out there from Facebook, trying to get a handle on, you know, better estimates of the disease as a way to help inform the policy. And we just were making decisions on bad data, and that is very troubling. You know, you can, a state, you know, it's recommended that a state have less than 10% positive, but a state can game that system by not testing. So we don't know what's happening in the states. We have indications, but it's not clear.
Yeah, and so because the data has been poor, have you or your institute done anything like surveying, like we talked about on our town hall last week about how Wisconsin and University of Oshkosh or University of Wisconsin Oshkosh is surveying and releasing business surveys, and they're doing it on a regular basis in order to try to at least understand trends within the business community. Have you done anything like that that is sort of outreach, or do you think that that's helpful?
We're actually having a conversation later this afternoon with colleagues at K-State to talk about a business survey. As I presented results from the KC Chamber, the Lawrence Chamber has also done a business survey. I didn't present those results here, but you know, we're trying to make that data known to people so that they can get a sense of what's happening in terms of economic activity. You know, our UEDA grant will have more research funding for our university, and we've already talked to the Kansas Department of Commerce about projects that we can do to help the state better understand what's going on. One thing that we think is really salient in terms of economic activity is broadband access. You know, my children have had to move to online online classes, and I have one child in a private school, one child in a public school, and the child in the public school, they were slow to get online because some of the teachers didn't have access to high-speed internet, and several of the students didn't. And without access to broadband in an economy that looks like it's going to be opening and shutting with regularity until we have some sort of a handle on this disease, broadband is essential. And we, you know, trying to understand how education has been able to work or not work, or how businesses have been able to not work or not work. And this is critically important to understand where the bottlenecks are and what we can do to help as a state.
What has your reaction been to cities laying off staff, including city managers, and where do you think cities should invest?
Well, you know, one of the things that I'm hopeful that the state government is able to do is to work with their federal congressional delegation. The state and local governments need to be bailed out. I mean, government is the only sector that's really holding the economy together right now. If you lay off teachers, if you lay off local government or state government people, it's penny wise and pound foolish, because those people contribute to economic activity. They're providing services to the population that needs those services. So, you know, I'm hoping that Congress gets its act together and provides support to the state governments in ways that they did during the Great Recession. This downturn is going to make the Great Recession look like a blip, right? So we really need our federal congressional delegation to do more for the state and local governments.
And I'm assuming that you're saying that even beyond the EDA NOFA that was released this morning.
Oh, that's that's great, but that's not sufficient given the lost tax revenues. In the next 2 fiscal years, Kansas is going to lose $1.3 billion in revenue. It's estimated, and we're not alone.
Right.
All states are, because the economy shut down. And we really need to let our congressional delegation know that this is a natural disaster. This is not, states making bad choices and you're fixing a bad choices. This is not banks behaving badly. This is a worldwide economic catastrophe, and the government has a responsibility to help prop us up until the time that we can reopen and have, economic activity.
Mm-hmm. Is there a data collection system in place, and is this just not being used, or do pandemics not have this kind of system? Was it, caught by surprise, or, if there is bad data, what do you think that is?
We decided to develop our own test as a country. Our test didn't work. And then we got behind the curve, and we've been playing catch up ever since. Eventually, US technology will win the day, but it takes time, and we don't have time.
Makes sense. In your presentation, did the job loss numbers include those individuals who are furloughed?
I'm not sure. I think they don't include the furlough necessarily, but I'd have to double check on that.
Okay. And how about, this is obviously, like I mentioned in the introduction, we like to showcase best practices, and this is obviously a best practice. What sort of lessons learned have you discovered as a result of, going through this, which is unprecedented for everyone? What have you learned specifically relative to data and the role that you're in, and even the role that the university plays in this kind of environment?
Well, we're at a public research university, and our institute viewed this as a service to the state. We've tried to provide the data and information so that people can make informed choices. Even if the data are bad on testing, we need to know what's happening with the economy, know what's happening with the virus, be aware of using the information that we have at our disposal to sort of use it to make informed decisions. So first and foremost, we want to be a resource for the people of the state of Kansas and the region to understand what's happening to the economy and with respect to the virus. Because one of the lessons I learned starting looking at this was that health policy is economic policy for the time being. And so I had to learn about epidemiology and how the virus spreads and what are, my first presentation explained the reproduction rate of COVID-19, something I had never known before March, what a reproduction rate of a virus is. And then using my skills as an empirical economist to try to come up with alternative ways to understand how the virus is progressing and alternative ways of how the economy is being affected, given that our economic data come out with such a lag. That's why I'm a labor economist. We're focusing on the unemployment claims because that is the most frequent data available in terms of what's happening to the economy. And you can use that to make inferences about the long-term economic impact. One of the things that, we share these data with the local press. And one of the things that last week I said to everybody was that, unemployment benefits are taxed. And those claiming unemployment benefits are not, necessarily withholding. So they're going to have a really nasty surprise in April 2021 if they haven't withheld any of their taxes from those benefits. So it's those types of details that kind of fall by the wayside that we're trying to communicate to the public.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think, many institutions have economic development partners that they collaborate with. What can those economic development organizations do to help communities spring back their economies given the federal and sometimes state phase-in guidelines?
So what we need is liquidity for the small businesses. And we need sort of a community coming together to recognize that it's the small businesses that are the most impacted. So my son's high school, is sponsored, the athletic program is sponsored by, local restaurants. And they said, the high school said, go buy carryout from these restaurants. They supported us, let's us support them. I think it's that type of community engagement, getting the message out. We're all kind of starved for connections, right? And so the business community can help us, connect virtually or make us aware of what's happening in our communities.
That's great. Thank you. And, as we transition into sort of this open-ended forum, sometimes we do have some questions continually pop up for you. So if you don't mind sticking around for a few minutes, we'd love to have you participate in the rest of the conversation. But I do want to transition and just at least give an opportunity for the audience to ask questions of each other. So if you do have a question that you'd like to pose to the group, please raise your hand in the participants function, and I'll allow you to speak and ask the question, and then we'll see if we can get any responses. I know that in the chat, Renee Shelton mentioned about how the North Dakota Department of Commerce is leading efforts for reporting and surveying. And Renee, if you'd like to share just a few little updates about that, please raise your hand, and I'd love to have you to speak about that. But of course, anyone is more than willing to or able and invited to participate and ask a question. I'll just give it a minute here. No questions for anyone? From anyone? Okay, how about going into talking about protecting human capital and jobs? Anything going on this week about any unique workforce initiatives, reskilling programs, supporting the unemployed in any way? Does anyone have any things that they've seen there or questions that they have relative to human capital and jobs that they'd like to ask the group? Jenna, do you have something?
Yeah, I've done some reading, and it talks about women being more impacted with the coronavirus in this pandemic, and I was wondering if Donna could maybe.
Yeah, actually, this morning I was talking with Dietem Tuzman, who's a research economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. She showed that, so one of the things about past recessions is that men typically work in cyclically sensitive industries like construction and manufacturing. And so male unemployment is always higher than female unemployment. And Dietem's new work shows, using unemployment claims, that women are disproportionately affected in terms of unemployment. So if you look at the Kansas data, it's about half men and half women, but that's much higher relatively speaking. So women are working in industries that are more likely to be affected. The other thing is that women are more likely, if they are working, to be essential workers. So they're working in grocery stores and other outlets that are currently open. So they're more likely to be exposed to the virus if they are working. But the one good news is that if you look at how the virus works, it's more fatal for men than for women. I don't know why that is, but that's what the research has shown.
So as far as going back, and I'll let Donna answer this, but as well, if anyone else has anything they'd like to add, please raise your hand. What are the thoughts about upcoming unemployment numbers, since many people are even having difficulty filing based on what the unemployment could reach? Do you have any projections there?
You can basically download the unemployment claims data, add it up over the past 6 weeks, and divide by labor force in February 2020 and get a projected unemployment rate. We did that for Kansas. It's about 16%. I haven't done it for the US. We did it for Missouri. Well, it's about 16%. But again, these numbers are minimums. Mm-hmm. We're not counting all of those self-employed who will qualify for unemployment benefits from the federal government. They just started coming online a couple of weeks ago or 10 days ago. So they really haven't been pulled into the unemployment claims system yet. And then there are other states that have made it difficult to actually file for unemployment insurance. So I'm thinking of Florida. There have been reports about Florida making the process of applying for benefits very difficult. So there will be undercounts in some states like that as well. So there are different measures of unemployment. There's the unemployment rate that we all look at, and then there are underemployed or discouraged workers. Those numbers are going to be much higher.
Yeah, and I think that I think this question too is talking about just the problems with the unemployment system and the overwhelming, just the act of filing itself, that many people have, maybe started the application process and been locked out, or haven't been able to get into the system, and that data doesn't even account for some of those people. So it could be a lot worse than what we anticipate.
So I'm wondering if anybody in the audience has been keeping track of food insecurity. There was a Brookings report yesterday that 1 in 5 children in the survey were going hungry. We have reports in Kansas that our food banks are having lots, miles long lines to get food from the food banks. And our health foundation actually gave money to the food bank system so that it could meet the food security needs of people who have lost their jobs. So has anybody in the audience, have they been keeping track of or aware of food insecurity in their state?
That's a good question. Is anyone, if you do, you can raise your hand using the raise your hand function. I'm happy to let you answer that. I know that we're seeing significant lines and support for the food, just the whole food banks and pantries and all that. I mean, the support in Pittsburgh has been pretty remarkable, and it's made some national news. I'm going to promote Renee to speak to that. So Renee, you can unmute yourself whenever you're ready.
Hi, this is Renee Shelton, and I'm with the University of North Dakota Center for Innovation. Just to really ditto what Tim said, while we haven't seen the statistics here, we have food lines like we have not seen across the state. And mostly, of course, in the more populated cities, because really the entire state is very rural. We only have a few, larger cities. But, you know, the news is definitely following that these food banks are running dry. And I will have to say the small businesses, at least in the town I'm in Grand Forks and in Fargo, while they have been forced to close, they have been raising money and feeding the children and going to the schools and giving out lunches every day. So, you know, no questions asked, just line up, come to school if you'd like your child to have lunch. So, you know, that's been heartbreaking to see, but nice to see that our community, you know, is definitely trying to take care of its own. And your report is great. Our Department of Commerce is taking the lead on that, although I like I will share it with them because I like a lot of what you're doing. But, you know, the numbers are very similar here in North Dakota that you know, are showing in Kansas and Missouri.
Yeah, it's sobering.
It is.
So there was a question in the chat about May college graduates. There is a lot of evidence that graduating during a recession is bad for your economic prospects. If a student is graduating and they're at all interested in going to graduate school, this is a great time to go to graduate school because you know, there aren't jobs and finding a job is going to be really hard. And so that way, if you are, you know, wanting to get an MBA or go to law school, the opportunity cost of going to school is going to be lower. So that would be, you know, something to consider. If you are looking for a job, it's going to be a long process. And the only sectors that I'm aware of that are hiring are, you know, like Amazon's hiring, Walmart's hiring, and certain government jobs. One of our students actually took a job with the Kansas Department of Commerce. So, but this is the worst job market of my lifetime. So
What of the sectors that you presented, you know, you kind of presented relative to GDP, which do you think has the most likelihood of recovering in Kansas, or recovering quickest, let's say, or recovering? I don't. Recovery. The definition of recovery is challenging in itself. So, like, but to be sustainable again.
Well, healthcare will come back online. A lot of the drop in consumption the last part of March was in health services. So people are postponing some elective services. They're not going to be able to stay away from the doctor and the dentist forever, so health consumption will go up. Any work that you can do from home, about 30% of jobs can be done from home. So anything that can be done from home is more likely to come back. So the technical, computer science, information management, professional technical services, those are going to probably go along, and then as the economy improves, they'll grow again. What's going to come back the last is, you know, all those services, food, health services. I mean, I'm talking about sort of like, so I get a massage, and my massage therapist sent me like a funny video from Facebook of getting a remote massage. You know, it's kind of hard to get a safe massage these days, right? Those types of services are going to be slow in coming back.
And I'll take myself off mute there. And do you have any recommendations for UETA members to assist in, you know, current situation and eventual recovery, recognizing that, you know, many folks are, you know, in our ranks, much like you and Jenna, who are, you know, doing great work in research, or, you know, leading entrepreneurship programs, or paying attention to workforce, or just looking at general economic development. Do you have any recommendations on what we can do to assist the current situation?
Well, I think that we need, you know, to synthesize the information, right? We need to like let the public and the policymaker know what's happening out there. They don't have the bandwidth to be able to interpret the data that we have. We have the skills and the ability to say, okay, this is what's happening to the economy. Here's where your problems are. Here's where things are okay. This is how we can move forward. You know, I'm really concerned about, you know, I'm a firm believer that entrepreneurship is the future of economic growth. And it's the small entrepreneurial firms that are getting hammered. So to the extent that we can help states figure out policies that will promote this type of entrepreneurial activity as we come out of this recession, I think it's very important.
That's great. No, thank you very much. And I'll open it up with the last few minutes here to everyone else and see if you have any other questions. You know, we also have a general question that we talk about, you know, supporting business. Or is there a shift to e-commerce, sort of creating more of an omni-channel approach for businesses, business owner training, technical assistance, assisting businesses to remain relevant? If there's any ideas or questions or thoughts about that, let that percolate for a minute. I just posted in the chat a link to our upcoming webinar, which is this coming Monday. The webinar is the Spring 2020 Analysis, COVID-19 and the Economic Outlook. So it is half sold out. It's a free webinar, but it's half registered for right now. So please take an opportunity if you do want to attend that on Monday. That's happening at 3 o'clock Eastern time on Monday the 11th. And it'll feature Chris Thornburg of Beacon Economics, who's going to be talking and giving his outlook on the economic outlook relative to COVID-19. So please, if you do feel so inclined and are available and aren't completely virtual meetinged out, please feel free to join us on Monday. Donna, Jenna, any closing comments or thoughts?
I'm just going to say there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's not going to be smooth coming out of this recovery. It's going to be a slog. That's as far as I go for a forecast.
Understood. Jenna?
Yeah, and I just want to say, you know, anybody has any questions about the data or how we put together the various visualizations, please follow up with us. We're more than happy to share it. And we use public sources of data, so it's things that you should be able to replicate for your own state and or region. Great.
Thank you both. Jenna, thanks for your leadership all throughout the year in UEDA, and appreciate your service to the organization. And Donna, thank you for being with us today, and for having Jenna, your colleague, work so closely with UEDA. We really appreciate it. We'll continue these town halls as long as we possibly can. Consider your Monday registration for the economic outlook, and we'll be back next week with another presentation, another town hall. Look for that announcement to come out on Monday or Tuesday of next week. And if you do have any ideas or any interest in presenting as a spotlight presentation, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I realize I never introduced myself in the beginning, but my name's Tim Hines. I'm the Executive Director of UEDA, and you can find my information on the website if you don't have it already. And if you need help connecting with Donna or any of our other panelists at any time, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm here to provide that connection. So thank you very much for being with us today, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.